The forest was suffocating with silence, broken only by the occasional snap of a branch under the weight of the wind. A thick fog hugged the ground, hiding the twisted trunks and jagged branches that seemed to stretch into infinity. Somewhere deep in the woods, an injured dog lay motionless, his breath shallow, his body battered and bruised. His once shiny coat was now matted and stained, his paw pads torn from stumbling through the underbrush, lost and forgotten. He had been left here, abandoned as if his life no longer mattered. No one had bothered to stop. No one had cared to look for him. The quiet ache in his chest, both physical and emotional, was all he had left. The pain of being left behind consumed him, but there was something else. A flicker of hope, tiny but undeniable, lingering in the corners of his fading consciousness. Then there was a sound, a crack of a twig, the distant echo of human footsteps. Someone was coming. His eyes fluttered open, barely able to focus, but in that moment, something inside him stirred. Maybe, just maybe, someone cared. The dog's eyes caught sight of a figure moving through the mist, each step more hesitant than the last. It wasn't much, just a faint silhouette, but to him, it was everything. The forest was a dark abyss, its edges blurring into shadows that swallowed everything in their path. The sky above was thick with clouds, and the air, damp and heavy, carried the smell of moss and decay. In the distance, a broken howl echoed, a sound that could have been mistaken for the wind, but was unmistakably a cry for help. Carly had been hiking with her dog, Juno, but a sudden shift in the weather had forced her to seek shelter. She never expected to be drawn into the dense woods that afternoon, but a low whine reached her ears, a sound she couldn't ignore. At first, she assumed it was just another animal, some creature hidden away in the fog. But the whine became a cry, and as she moved deeper into the woods, the weight of the sound pressed on her chest. The path was no longer visible, swallowed by thickets of wild growth, but Carly pushed on, driven by an urgency she couldn't explain. She stumbled over roots, her breath quickening with every step. She was out of breath and lost in her thoughts, but then, there it was, the source of the cry. Lying in a hollow beneath an ancient oak tree was a dog. His eyes were dull, and his fur was matted with dirt and blood. He didn't move, not even when Carly knelt beside him. Her hand trembled as she reached out, brushing his fur. He flinched slightly, and a quiet gasp escaped her lips. This dog wasn't just injured, he was broken. The realization hit hard. He had been abandoned, left here to die alone. Her stomach turned, the weight of his suffering settling in her bones. Carly's heart ached, and without thinking, she gently lifted him into her arms. "I'm not leaving you here," she whispered, her voice raw, desperate. The dog's weight was too much for her to carry easily, but she couldn't let go. She couldn't just leave him to the forest's hunger. Her mind raced as she moved, searching for any sign of a path of escape. But the forest held its grip, and the further they went, the harder it became to breathe. As she carried the injured dog, every step felt like a battle, one where the stakes were more than her physical strength. The weight of the dog seemed to increase with each passing minute, as if his broken body had come to symbolize the crushing weight of her own guilt. How could anyone leave something so pure, so full of life, to suffer alone in a place like this? Her thoughts were a jumbled mess, but one thing was certain: she wasn't going to let him die here. Hours passed, and Carly's body ached in ways she hadn't thought possible. The sky, now an uninviting shade of gray, dripped cold mist onto her already soaked clothes. She had no idea how long it had been or how far they had traveled. But she couldn't stop, not now. The dog, his breathing shallow, lay in her arms like a lifeless ragdoll, but every now and then a tiny whimper escaped his throat. Each sound was a plea for salvation. A flash of movement caught her eye. Through the haze, she saw the faint outline of something that seemed out of place. A wooden sign with the words, "Trailhead," scrawled across it, barely visible through the mist. Relief surged through her, and with newfound strength, she moved toward the sign. She stumbled as she approached, her legs shaking from exhaustion. But just ahead, through the mist, was a clearing, and beyond that, the sound of distant voices. Her heart raced as she pushed forward, the dog clutched tightly in her arms, her vision blurred by both fog and tears. The voices grew louder, clearer, until at last she stumbled into the clearing and saw the group. They were hikers, standing in a circle around a campfire. "Help!" Carly gasped, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Lise, help him. He's hurt." One of the hikers, a man with broad shoulders and a concerned expression, stepped forward. He took the dog gently from Carly's arms and assessed the situation. His face fell as he saw the extent of the injuries, but there was no time to waste. "Stay with us," he said urgently. "We'll get him help. He's not done yet." And for the first time since she had found him, Carly allowed herself to believe that this dog, this broken soul, might just have a chance. The warmth of the fire contrasted sharply with the chill of the forest, wrapping around Carly like a blanket as she sat beside the dog. Her eyes never left him, watching as the hiker cleaned his wounds, his hands gentle but firm. Every touch seemed to stir something in the dog, a flicker of awareness in his glassy eyes. Hours had passed since Carly had stumbled upon the group, and the fire's glow was now the only thing that illuminated the night. But in those hours, something had changed. The dog, though still fragile, was no longer just a victim of his abandonment. Carly had called for help, and someone had answered. She had been the one to find him, but now, it wasn't just her alone in this fight. The hikers rallied around her, offering encouragement and warmth. They made phone calls, arranging for a ride to the nearest town, and setting up a safe place for the dog to rest. The minutes stretched into hours, and Carly stayed by the dog's side, her hand resting on his fur as she whispered words of reassurance. The quiet of the forest, the crackling of the fire, the soft hum of the wind through the trees, all of it faded away as Carly focused entirely on the life she was fighting to save. In those quiet moments, the dog seemed to sense her devotion. His breath, once shallow and strained, grew steadier, and his eyes, though tired, began to focus more clearly on her face. He wasn't gone yet. He was fighting too. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, its pale light creeping through the trees. Carly, exhausted but resolute, hadn't slept. She didn't dare. Not when the dog's recovery was still so fragile, so uncertain. But the worst of it was over. The hiker's call to the vet had brought hope. The dog was now being transported to a place where he could get the medical care he so desperately needed. As Carly watched him rest, curled up under a makeshift blanket by the fire, she found herself overwhelmed by the small but undeniable miracle unfolding before her. This wasn't the end of the dog's journey. It was just the beginning. And she, in some small way, had been part of that. For the first time in what felt like forever, Carly allowed herself to close her eyes, leaning back against the damp bark of a tree. The dog's quiet breathing was a steady, soothing rhythm, a sound that would stay with her long after she left the woods. Months passed. The forest that once seemed so suffocating was now a distant memory, replaced by a warmth and light that had once been hidden behind layers of pain and fear. Carly visited the dog in the town where he had been taken, and each time, he looked stronger. The pain in his eyes had faded, replaced with a spark of life, and every time they met, Carly felt a pull in her heart, a bond that had formed between them, a promise she hadn't realized she had made to herself. She named him Chance, a name that felt like fate, like something beyond coincidence. The dog, once abandoned in the woods, had found a new lease on life, and so had Carly. In caring for him, she found something she hadn't even known she needed. Purpose, a connection, a way back to herself. And when the sun set on another day, the sound of the wind through the trees seemed to carry with it a sense of peace, like a promise that no one, no matter how lost, would ever truly be alone days bled into weeks, and Chance's recovery was nothing short of a miracle. Carly had become his constant, his anchor in a world that had once been filled with cruelty and fear. The dog, once so wary of the world, now sought her out, tail wagging whenever she approached. His eyes, once clouded with pain and distrust, sparkled with a quiet joy, a sense of comfort he hadn't known before. It wasn't just his body that was healing, it was his soul. Each day, Carly watched him take small steps forward, each one a triumph over the pain of his past. He had been through so much, but now he was running through fields, paws light and graceful, as if the weight of the world had been lifted. Carly often found herself marveling at how quickly he adapted to this new life. The deep, ancient connection between human and animal was something she had always believed in, but seeing it unfold before her very eyes was a humbling experience. The world around them had changed too. The seasons had shifted. The bitter cold of winter had given way to the warmth of spring, and the earth had come alive once more. Flowers bloomed in bursts of color, and the air, now sweet with the smell of fresh grass and rain, felt like a new beginning for them both. But Carly knew that the real healing, the kind that went beyond physical recovery, was still ongoing. Chance had come so far, but the scars of his past remained, hidden beneath his fur. His trust had to be earned, slowly, patiently. Sometimes she would catch him staring at the door as if waiting for someone to come through. It was moments like those that broke her heart. She knew he was still haunted by his past, by the memory of being abandoned, left to die in a forest that had no mercy. But slowly, she began to see the walls crumble. She began to see the dog who had been a shadow of himself become a light, a beacon of hope that radiated with life. Carly spent hours with him every day, walking through the park, sitting quietly on the porch, or simply lying next to him on the floor as he rested his head on her lap. She let him know in every gesture that he was safe now, that he would never be alone again. One evening, as the golden hour bathed everything in soft, amber light, Carly sat on the porch, Chance by her side. The air was warm, the sound of crickets singing in the distance, and a gentle breeze whispered through the trees. She stroked his fur absent-mindedly, lost in the moment, but then he shifted. Chance stood up and walked to the edge of the porch, his eyes scanning the horizon, his body tense in a way Carly hadn't seen in weeks. A sense of unease spread through her. She could feel the tension in the air, the way his muscles tensed as if waiting for something she couldn't see. And then she heard it. A car engine, distant but unmistakable. For a brief, fleeting moment, Carly's heart sank. She didn't know why, but the thought of someone else taking Chance away, returning him to a place where he could be hurt again, was unbearable. She pushed the thought away, but as the car grew nearer, Chance's ears perked up. He turned to look at Carly, his eyes wide with an intensity that spoke volumes. And then, he did something unexpected. He walked over to her, pressing his body against hers, as if seeking reassurance. The small gesture struck Carly deeply. This dog, this incredible soul who had been discarded and forgotten, was now asking for her, for the promise she had made. And in that moment, Carly realized something important. She had become his home. She was the one place in this vast world where he truly belonged. The car finally pulled up to the driveway. Carly didn't move. She didn't need to. She had already made her choice. The person who stepped out of the car was a stranger, someone who claimed to be Chance's former owner. Their eyes met across the yard, but Carly didn't flinch. "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong dog," Carly said softly, her voice firm but kind. The stranger blinked, taken aback by her words. "But he's mine. He's the one I abandoned. He's my dog." The man stammered, his voice filled with a mix of regret and uncertainty. For a moment, Carly said nothing, just watched as the man's words hung in the air between them. And then she smiled, not out of malice, but out of something deeper. A quiet, unwavering certainty. "Not anymore," she said, her hand gently resting on Chance's back. "He's home now." The stranger hesitated, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of his own actions finally crushed him. "I don't know what to say," he whispered, guilt lining his face. Carly didn't need an apology. She didn't need anything from him. She looked at the man one last time before turning back to Chance, who was now looking up at her with a look that could only be described as pure devotion. Months passed since that day, and the man never came back. Chance's healing continued, but it was more than physical. It was spiritual, emotional. Carly began to see the joy that had always been within him slowly return. He was no longer just surviving. He was thriving. Their walks had become their sacred time, a time when the world faded away and the bond between them deepened. Carly had begun to see how much of a gift Chance was to her life. The dog who had been left in the woods, bruised and broken, had become a constant in her life, a companion who had shown her the power of love, of healing, and of forgiveness. She watched him run through the fields, his tail wagging with unrestrained joy. and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly content. Every moment she spent with him felt like a piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. He was more than a rescued dog. He was a friend, a partner, a teacher, and a reminder of the beauty in second chances. As the days turned into months and the seasons into years, Carly and Chance remained inseparable. No longer would they be haunted by the past. Together, they had rewritten their story, creating a new one filled with hope, love, and the promise that they would always be there for each other, no matter what. And as the sun set on yet another perfect evening, Carly couldn't help but smile. She had found her way back to the light, and Chance had led her there, one step at a time. The world was wide and filled with challenges, but with Chance by her side, Carly knew there was nothing they couldn't face together. And in the silence of the evening, as they sat together on the porch, the only sound was the soft rustle of the leaves in the wind. The sound of two souls who had found their home in each other, and that was enough. The years that followed carried with them the kind of peace Carly hadn't thought possible. Life, in its quiet rhythm, began to feel whole again. Each morning, as the sun broke over the horizon, Carly would find herself waking up to the gentle nudge of Chance's nose against her hand, his tail thumping against the floor, as though inviting her to start the day. And she always did, because the world felt different now, somehow better, with him by her side. Their routine was simple. Morning walks along the same winding path, the two of them silently enjoying the company of one another. No words were needed between them, just the shared understanding that, in this moment, everything was okay. They had both been given second chances, both healed by the simple, yet profound act of being there for each other. It wasn't just Chance who had changed. Carly had blossomed too. The woman who once lived in the shadow of guilt and sorrow had slowly transformed into someone new. Someone who learned to trust again. Someone who could love freely, without the weight of abandonment or fear holding her back. The relationship she had with Chance mirrored the growth she had undergone herself. They both, in their own way, had healed and in doing so, found a deep sense of belonging together. But it wasn't just the small, everyday moments that marked the change. It was the big ones, too. The milestones that happened when you least expected them. When you had no idea how far you had come until you could see the distance from where you started. One such moment came when Carly and Chance were out on one of their walks, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the fields. Carly stopped to take a breath, looking around the vast open space that stretched before her. She turned to Chance, his coat glistening in the warm light, and saw it then, this undeniable bond between them, stronger than ever. It was then that Carly realized this was their new chapter. This was their life now. She dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around Chance, burying her face in his soft fur, feeling the warmth of his body against hers. He nuzzled her face gently, his eyes calm, his heart steady. The connection between them was palpable, something real, something that would never be broken. The world, as it always does, continued to turn. The seasons came and went, bringing with them the familiar changes, the crispness of autumn, the bloom of spring, the summer heat, and the gentle frost of winter. But through it all, Carly and Chance remained constant, a steadfast dew against the shifting tides of time. Their home, once just a place of refuge, now felt like a sanctuary, a testament to their journey together. Carly had made a habit of taking pictures, capturing small, fleeting moments. Chance lying in the sun with his belly exposed, rolling in the grass, his joyful bark echoing through the air, their quiet evenings on the porch, watching the world settle down for the night, the morning coffees, where Carly would sip slowly, Chance curled up beside her, his eyes half closed in contentment. They had their own little world now, one that was built on trust, love, and the quiet understanding that the past, with all its heartbreak, no longer held them captive. But Carly knew that their journey wasn't finished. It wasn't about being saved or rescued anymore. It was about living, truly living. The healing wasn't just a one-time event. It was ongoing, like the waves of the ocean that never stopped coming, always reshaping the shores. They were part of something bigger than themselves now, a community, a story that rippled out and touched others. Carly had found herself talking to people about Chance, sharing his story with others who, like her, had suffered or had felt lost or alone. She would often find herself saying, with a smile, "You never know what a second chance can do for you." It was true. In their time together, they had become something more than two souls caught in a tangled web of sorrow and fear. They had become a beacon, a light for others to follow. One evening, as they stood together watching the sun dip beneath the horizon, Carly felt a sense of completion. She knew there would always be challenges ahead. Life wasn't perfect. But in that moment, with the cool evening breeze tussling her hair and the soft, rhythmic breathing of Chance beside her, she knew they had overcome the impossible. Chance was no longer just a survivor. He was a warrior, and so was she. Carly's heart swelled with love, the kind that came from living through something difficult, something that changed you, something that showed you what really mattered in life. In that moment, everything was clear. She had been through hell, but she had found her way out, thanks to Chance and the miracle of second chances. Life, with all its peaceful rhythms, was never without its trials. Just as Carly and Chance had settled into their newfound happiness, an unexpected storm blew in. It wasn't a literal storm, but one that shook Carly's world in ways she hadn't prepared for. It began with a call that rattled her heart and made her hands tremble as she gripped the phone. A woman's voice on the other end, calm but firm, informed Carly that a nearby animal shelter was closing, and they had a number of animals in need of urgent care. The shelter was overwhelmed and they had nowhere else to turn. "They're looking for foster homes," the woman explained. "If you're able to help, we could really use you." For a moment, Carly's mind went blank. She looked at Chance, his eyes soft and content, as he rested at her feet. The bond between them was undeniable. How could she open her home to another dog when Chance was still healing, when the memories of his own abandonment were so fresh? But as she sat there, she thought of all the other animals, like Chance, who had been forgotten, who had no one to turn to. The pull to help, to offer a second chance to someone else, grew too strong to ignore. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady. "I'll take one in." The decision came with its weight, and she wasn't sure what to expect. But she knew one thing for sure: it was the right thing to do. The next few days were filled with nervous anticipation. Carly prepared the house, setting up an area in the living room for the new dog, rearranging some of the furniture. Chance watched her with his usual, steady gaze. His curiosity piqued but not overwhelmed by the sudden change in their home. When the day came, Carly drove to the shelter, her heart pounding as she wondered how Chance would react. Would he be jealous? Would he accept this new dog? There were so many unknowns, but as she stepped into the shelter, she couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose. She walked through the rows of kennels, each one housing an animal that seemed to share the same sad story as Chance's. Abandoned, left behind, desperate for a chance at a better life. Then, her eyes landed on a small, trembling dog, a small terrier mix with wide, fearful eyes and a coat that was matted and patchy. His demeanor mirrored what Chance must have felt that day he was abandoned. Alone, unsure, and frightened. She knelt down and gently spoke to the dog, reaching her hand out. His eyes darted back and forth, his body stiff with hesitation, but after a moment, he cautiously approached. "I'll take him," she told the shelter worker, and they quickly arranged the paperwork. When they arrived home, Carly's heart raced with anticipation, and Chance's quiet presence was reassuring. She let the new dog, whom she named Milo, explore the house while Chance watched, his head cocked slightly to the side. There was tension in the air, a silent question lingering between them. How would this new chapter unfold? The first few days were awkward, filled with the kind of tension that comes with any new relationship, whether human or animal. Milo was still terrified of everything: loud noises, sudden movements, even Carly's attempts to approach him with kindness. His eyes would widen in fear every time she got too close, and he would dart away, hiding in corners or behind furniture. Chance, though, wasn't exactly thrilled about the new addition either. He would watch from a distance, his posture stiff, his gaze skeptical. It was as if he were silently asking Carly, "Who is this, and why are they here?" Milo's nervous energy didn't help, and Carly found herself walking on eggshells around him. Every little sound seemed to make him flinch, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Carly could only imagine how much pain and fear he had been through to develop such a deep mistrust of the world. But Carly was patient. She knew it took time for Chance to heal, and she knew it would take time for Milo too. She began offering Milo treats from her hand, sitting quietly near him, letting him approach her when he felt safe. It was a delicate dance of trust, one that needed to be earned. One afternoon, as the two dogs sat together in the living room, Milo cautiously inched closer to Chance. At first, Chance didn't seem to care, but as Milo sat just within reach, Chance turned to him, his eyes calm, his body relaxed. Slowly, Chance sniffed the air around Milo, his tail wagging just the slightest bit. And then, in a surprising move, Chance lay down beside him. Milo, still nervous, looked at him for a long moment before slowly lowering himself to the floor. And just like that, the two dogs, once strangers to each other, began to form an unspoken understanding. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The house, once filled with the soft sounds of Carly and Chance's routines, now had a new dynamic. The quiet whimpers of Milo's nervous energy, the occasional barks from Chance as he tried to engage, the cautious movements as they circled each other, all of it filled the house with a new, strange kind of life. But Carly saw it every day. Milo was becoming more comfortable. He was learning that it was safe to be here, that he wasn't alone. And Chance, though still keeping his distance, was starting to show signs of acceptance. Their bond wasn't just forming between Carly and Milo, but between the two dogs too. It wasn't an overnight change, but it was happening piece by piece. Weeks passed, and the house settled into a new rhythm, one that now included both Chance and Milo. The initial fears had softened, replaced by curiosity, even a bit of playfulness. Chance, ever the steady presence, had begun to take on a mentor-like role with Milo. He would lead the way during their walks, with Milo hesitantly following behind. When they were in the yard, Chance would run ahead, his tail high, while Milo would linger a bit behind, always looking for reassurance. But as time went on, Chance's actions began to show a different side of him. He was becoming more protective of Milo, guiding him through moments of anxiety, leading him to safety when Milo's fear would become overwhelming. And Milo, in turn, was beginning to trust him, even follow him, in ways Carly had hoped but didn't expect so quickly. One evening, after a long walk, Carly let the dogs out into the backyard to play. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink, and the air was warm and inviting. Milo, still a little hesitant in the open space, paused at the edge of the yard. But then Chance bounded forward, his usual joyful energy infectious, and Milo's eyes lit up. Without thinking, Milo took off after Chance, his small legs moving faster than Carly had ever seen him move before. For a moment, everything stopped. Chance turned to look back at Milo, who was now running tail high, a small, joyous bark escaping his lips. Carly stood at the edge of the yard, watching as the two dogs ran circles around each other. It was a moment of pure joy, a moment where everything they had been through, every struggle, every fear, every moment of doubt, seemed to fade away. For the first time, Carly realized that Milo had become part of their story, not just as a survivor, but as a member of their family. And as she watched Chance and Milo play together, the sun dipping below the horizon, Carly knew that this was just the beginning of another beautiful chapter in their lives. The days turned into months, and Chance and Milo's bond only grew stronger. They had become inseparable, partners in every sense of the word. Whether it was running through the fields together, curling up in front of the fire at night, or simply sharing the quiet space of their home. The love that had started with Carly and Chance had now expanded, filling their home with laughter, joy, and companionship. Carly had watched as Chance had gone from being a broken, abandoned dog to a strong, confident companion. And now, she watched as Milo did the same. In their shared journey of healing, they had formed a family that no longer feared the world, but embraced it with the strength of their bond. They were no longer defined by their pasts, but by the love they had for each other and the home they had created together. Carly had given Chance a second chance, and in doing so, had discovered the power of healing, of love, and of the incredible resilience of animals, and of humans who learned to trust again. As Carly stood in the yard, looking out over the land, the sun setting softly in the distance, she knew there was nothing they couldn't face together. The road ahead would not always be easy, but as long as they had each other, they would always have a home. And for Carly, that was everything. As the seasons continued to change, Carly, Chance, and Milo thrived together, their bond growing deeper with each passing day. What had started as a journey of rescue had turned into something even more profound: a family. In the warmth of their home, surrounded by the unconditional love of her two dogs, Carly felt a peace she had never known before. Each morning, when the sun painted the sky with hues of gold, Carly would watch Chance and Milo chase each other in the yard, their joy infectious, their laughter filling the air. The healing wasn't just physical. It had woven itself into the very fabric of their lives, creating a tapestry of love, trust, and resilience. They had each found their second chance, and in that, they had given each other a purpose. No longer burdened by their pasts, they embraced the future with open hearts, knowing that, together, they could face anything. In the quiet moments, as they curled up on the couch or lay together in the yard, Carly realized something simple, yet profound. Home wasn't just a place. It was a feeling, one they had built together, with every step, every bark, and every moment of love shared. And in that, she had everything: